So thanks the organizers for inviting me. The usual disclaimer applies because I work at a policy institution. Let me move this on. So let me see where it all started for me personally, where this journey started. And this was with the FSAP, so the IMF coming into a country and telling the country that it's missing some risks, etc. And at that time, way back in 2003, we thought, well, we do something really smart and involved, and we do this network analysis, and then we can show them that we're actually on top of things. And so I started on this project where we basically copied things that Christian had already done, and Martin Sommer in Austria put me on the right track, and we did a very simple network analysis, which is very deterministic, no behavior. The data wasn't really that good, but we made do. And this was part of this literature at that time where everybody was trying to get to a network model, but it was very simple, and the whole literature more or less bled to death because the results all showed that there was no problem, right? You had to make outrageous assumptions to get any traction in these models and any losses. Little did we know. So then in 2008, I had the opportunity to go to the Bank of England to work for Andy Haldane, his name has been mentioned, and work on some network stuff. So the network speech was part of that, and it was a very inspiring environment. It was also, I arrived in September 2008, which is a very exciting time at the Bank of England. Also, brilliant timing for myself because I tried to sell my house on the 15th of September of 2008, which, if you know the timing, was the Monday after Lehman. Really stupid move. Anyway, so yeah, my predictions for my own account were horrible at the time, but the time at the Bank of England was very nice. But at that time, one of the key things that stuck around was that we needed to see the structure in some way. We needed to define the interconnectedness and see them and show them to policymakers. So for policymakers, my experience is that as soon as you put some math on the slides, they're lost, right? So it doesn't help me if I want to convince my board to come with math. So although that might be a good representation of the network, it's not useful in communicating the characteristics of the networks. So this led into a foray into dynamic visualizations, and the references there. It showcases how, with, in this case, target data, you can show the dynamics of a network evolving. Is this otherwise theory-based? No, it's not. Can you show sort of the truth with this? No, you can't either, because I can twist around the projection of this network in many ways, show you very different sort of real networks, and they would all be consistent with the same data. So be careful there. On the plus side, this does show you, if you sort of take the time and look through them, does show you a narrative that you could use. In the same line, and I mean, all of this stuff is, I'm showcasing my own work, but there's others that do very similar things, and it's in many cases much more nicely done. So, and going through, one way to look at it was to try and visualize the networks. Another way is that we try and find more rigorous ways of characterizing a network. And this could be either looking at the scale freeness of some distribution of degrees, or at particular, say, star structures or core periphery structures, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, this paper is one example. But BIS colleagues with Guts van Peter and Ben Craig have done an earlier paper, and there's several others that have looked at trying to get to sort of a more rigorous capture of the network. Let me speed up. So then somehow I ended up at this tower, which is the BIS in Basel. Um, and so it's a very ominous building. You can see it from practically anywhere in Basel. You can see this tower, so you're never lost really if you work at the BIS, because you can always go home here. And somewhere on the second floor, there is this room with an extra secret door and all the kind of doing very secret things where all the data on all the networks in the world is collected. Not true, no. What we do collect there are the interconnectedness between the GSIBs. So every week there's a report from each of the largest banks in the world, so the 30 largest banks, on their top 50 counterparties. So it gives you a lot of information about the interconnectedness between the largest banks in the world. So it's not the full financial system, but a pretty good chunk. What that taught me, that even in that relatively confined and controlled environment where we can tell not completely, but we can more or less tell the banks what they should report to us, it's very complicated to get a good understanding of what we're actually measuring. Right? So we have a very nice handbook or guidelines to the reports, and we're asking them to, for instance, produce all the CDS notionals, the stuff that Stefano was showing you. But then you get questions on how that should work out in practice. So what, for instance, do about index CDS? So that is an exposure not on just one underlying name, but a bunch of underlying names. Which bit of that exposure is attributed to the individual components of the CDS? And sort of a whole range of really complicated accounting questions. And well, to me, if you say accounting, I sort of doze off. But it is essential. I mean, it is essential to look at how these things are recorded. Because if we don't get the accounting right, that is what the banks really see. It's not the true risk, it's the accounting risks that matter. So then we get to Stefano's wonderful picture. And here, I think it's a wonderful step, but it's a step on a pretty long road, because this is sort of scratching the surface of all this wonderful, rich data that we're now collecting. And it's based on a regulation called EMIR, where practically all the, well, not practically all, a large chunk, again, I should caveat myself, a large chunk of all the derivative trading in Europe is collected. And these are just the more or less the aggregates, but underneath is this sea of CDS transactions, interest rate swap transactions, et cetera, that are streaming in at all the central banks and other supervisory institutions. I don't think we've really grasped how to make this work, right? How to get this data in and actually understand it. So one of the key things that we're trying, the ESRB is trying as well, but we at Dutch Central Bank are trying, is to talk to everybody involved, everybody who touches the data, and talk about those definitions. So what is it that we are actually collecting here? And can we aggregate from the underlying data to this picture? Because Stefano is taking something that's already aggregated by some third party, but the underlying data, we should be able to replicate that and make our own choices. So, and that leads me to a picture like this, which is a multiplex, multi-layer, whatever you want to call it. We have CDS, but we also have all these other data at supervisory institutions. So you have the target data, which gives you something about, tells you something about the funding and the payment streams. We have MiFID, which gives you every single transaction in the market. We have lots of information on prudential ratios, etc., and that would allow you to fill up all of these layers. But that requires quite a drastic investment in knowledge at central banks and supervisors to make this happen. We don't always have this nice data. In some cases, we have gaps, and was already alluded to. This is this network reconstruction literature. So there, with the Basel Committee, I'm chairing this group where we are doing a horse race between not just Diego's method, but a number of other methods to see whether we can come up with hints or guidelines on which kind of replication method to use if you don't have all this wonderful bilateral data that, for instance, Sebastian has worked with in Mexico, sort of the heaven of multi-layer data. So what we do is you take the real data, the yellow matrix. From those, we compute the marginals. With the marginals, you reconstruct a network, and we see whether the yellow and the blue matrix match up. Then, getting close to the end, data is nice. The linkages, it's nice to have those, but it's also good to try and do something on with behavior. And this is a paper with Falk Breuning and Chico Blasquez from the VU, where we have a structural model where there's behavior of optimizing agents in an interbank market, and you can see that just small changes of the environment lead to big changes in activity of the network, which I don't have time to talk about that today. With that, it's great to be here, give you some key messages. The data that are needed to do all the stuff that we talked about this morning is getting there, but it's not there yet. We need much more work on boring stuff like accounting, definitions of what is the entity and what is the country, etc. We need more on sharing data. We need more on linking up the different layers. And we definitely need more on behavior. On that, I want to add one more remark on the agent-based models. As Philip was saying this morning, that this is getting maybe more traction in policy than it's getting in academia. That might very well be the case. And we are putting, the Basel Committee is putting out a working paper in a week or two where, again, a group I chaired and participated, where we have an overview of how agent-based models can help you think about liquidity stress testing. With that, thank you very much for your attention.